One of my questions for you, Sam, is, why that inflection point? I mean, it was where it like totally changes slope there, right? So it's kind of going up through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And then once you hit the mid to late 70s, it just completely changes direction. So
Yes.
what is that inflection point, do you think?
It comes from something that happened in 1971 when basically the U.S. was off the gold standard since really the FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt presidency, but we were kind of on the gold standard. And after World War II, we put all the world's currencies, tied them to the dollar, and kind of fakey tied the dollar to gold. And that was called the Bretton Woods system, and it did its job fairly well. But in 1971, Richard Nixon he stopped gold convertibility, where if you had a bunch of bonds, federal bonds, you could turn them in and get gold. That was the deal. Now, nobody would actually do that, but the fact that you could do it made those bonds gold standard, to coin a phrase. And so what happened, though, was Nixon took us off convertibility at that point, legally took us off. And so what that means is that we just have had a total fiat currency back since then. Fiat currency means the government says this is what it's worth, and that's all there is to it. And the market says, well, that's what it's worth to you, but it's not what it's worth to us. So you take this fiat currency since 1971. That's when it starts up. That's when the graph starts to head up. And then every time the government spends more than it takes in, the bonds become worth less because people don't want to buy bonds. That raises interest rates. That suppresses the economy. So you look at all the factors. If you cut government spending, good things happen. If you raise government spending, bad things happen. If you start to run a deficit and run up debt, even worse things happen. And if you look at this graph here, I've published at Life, Liberty, Property at the Heartland Institute and at my Substack, stkarnick.substack.com. I've published numerous graphs that show you how as the federal spending rises, inflation rises. As the federal debt rises, in particular, inflation rises. So, and that is because the dollar is not a real thing. It is only a medium of exchange. And when you add in extra dollars, as we do regularly, to cover that debt, it's called monetizing the debt. When you add in dollars, you have more dollars chasing the same amount of goods and services. Well, what's going to happen? The prices have to go up, but they will go up also. They will go up, as mentioned earlier, unevenly. Some prices will rise faster than others. So your turkey gets to be very skinny because they're harder to get, and it's harder to raise that supply very quickly. And above all, and you can see this from some graphs I did a few weeks ago on Life, Liberty, Property, housing. Housing, you can't just add housing supply instantaneously, unless we all want to live in tents. It can't be done. So that when you inflate, you really make housing more and more expensive. I have a graph that you can find on Life, Liberty, Property on the Heartland website and at my Substack. I have a graph that shows how housing has gotten more and more expensive starting in 1971. And that's the real problem.
So I've also seen people argue that food costs are rising in part due to like consolidation of grocery stores. And the argument that I had read was that there is a law that the government stopped enforcing around that same period of time that bans certain kinds of price discrimination where, like Walmart can't, or like a supplier isn't supposed to be able to give Walmart special deals over some local grocer or something for their goods. But they don't enforce that anymore. So what has been argued is that companies like Walmart are able to way easily outcompete smaller grocers. And it's not just a matter of scale on getting these like special deals with produce providers. And so it undercuts these small grocers, and then they have to like struggle to survive or close or whatever. So what about, I mean, I think in the chat you said that wasn't so much a factor, um,
Right.
even though the numbers kind of, the inflection points are sort of the same.
But wait a
Yeah,
second.
it's
We're
because
talking here about the food. So food prices are
Yeah.
still high. Why? Okay. So
Yeah.
aside from the money printing and all that kind of stuff, which definitely adds to it, Linnea, I think that you're sort of on to the one of the big causes here, and that is consolidation in the processing places. It's not necessarily the grocery stores. Those are the the end of the road there. Also, you got to keep in mind that to ship those to the grocery store, that costs more money because energy is up. To heat those stores costs more money. To the air conditioning units, the freezers, the blah blah blah. So if you look at the profit margin of major grocery stores, including Walmart, Target, and Albertsons and all the big ones, it's like 1%. It's really, really I have worked at a grocery store. They're not making just tons and tons of money. I think what the real root of the problem is the consolidation with one or two giant companies that totally dominate the beef market. Why is that? I saw a really interesting interview with a local rancher on Fox News a couple of days ago, and it just blew my mind how complicated the beef market is and how it is just totally monopolized and dominated by a couple of these mass producers. That same thing is happening with grains, with cereals, with all sorts of stuff. So I think that it's so easy to point the finger at the grocery store and say, oh, they're jacking up the prices so they can make a lot of money. No, they're not, because the grocery industry is very, very, competitive. It's, it's the regulations, it's the environmental regulations, it's all that stuff that is, I think, it really, impeding a free market. And just like Sam said, we don't have a free market with housing. We don't have a free market with, higher education. We don't have a free market with our food and grocery production either.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely definitely true. And as Chris pointed out, we had a couple of articles that we were going to touch on here that, say even NPR admits that it's not the grocery store's fault. You see all sorts of whinging from leftists about price gouging, but grocery profit margins themselves are also down. So for decades, there's an article that we found that I think Sam posted from River News that explains about how grocery store profit margins have usually ranged from around 1% to 3%. And in 2023, the grocery store profit margin plunged to 1.6%. So they are not that to me sounds like they were trying hard to keep prices down. As we said, even NPR knows this. Gross profit margins of big name stores and brands are suffering. So if you scroll down, is this the NPR article? Let's go to NPR. Okay, if you scroll down in the NPR article, there's a couple of charts that show the actual, right there, gross profits of big name stores. So this is your Walmart, your Kroger, PepsiCo, all those guys. And look,
those are the manufacturers.
Oh yes. Well, yeah, the manufacturers would be like PepsiCo, Procter & Gamble, but Walmart and Kroger are not. Where'd you go? Go back up there. But Walmart and Kroger are grocery supermarket chains. But look, they're nobody's profit margins are getting better here. You are not being price gouged by these companies.
Right. Linnea, those are gross profit margins, and gross profit margins are before, that's just the cost of the things that you're getting to work with. So you have to add labor and marketing and things like that. Well, one of the things that's happening has been that because of changes in laws on the federal level and especially state and local level, people cost more now. Labor costs more. So you have a lot of labor in things like supermarkets and so forth, and so the costs go up, and they get squeezed because they can only raise prices so much, and they really try to resist, as you've seen by the full net profit margin is very low. Now, what Chris brought up about consolidation, industrial consolidation in the food industry, is an important issue. And it is, again, it's not a crisis of capitalism or a problem that capitalism has created. It's a crisis of crony capitalism that government has created. These companies get bigger and bigger and bigger in part because our tax system encourages this business. Our regulatory system encourages this bigness. We need to change those things so that we can find out what, in fact, a free market system might look like in the good old US of A, because we don't have one or anything like it. And so that's the real problem that we need to solve. And frankly, we need to communicate this, people. And let's be very clear: the Trump administration has not been good at this. Although Scott Bessent, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm sorry, but Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, has been pretty right on things. And I think he has a good way of stating things. But the problem we have is that we do not have free market capitalism. We have crony capitalism. And I think if the people on the right and free market supporters were to make that point and be very clear about it day after day, the way we do here at the Heartland Institute, I think we could make a lot more progress in beating inflation and in creating greater affordability.
In terms of the food prices, I also do think that the tariffs did play a role, because why else would Trump say that he's going to drop the tariffs on beef and coffee to make them go down? So, I mean, I generally kind of understand the argument for tariffs when you want to protect a budding industry. But last time I checked, we don't have a really great coffee industry in the United States. So I don't really understand why we put tariffs on coffee to begin with. I mean, the price of Dunkin' Donuts coffee, which I've been buying for years, is out of control. It is outrageous. I'm talking about the grinds, not even going to Dunkin'. I'm talking about just Dunkin' Donuts coffee at the grocery store. It's just out of this world.
Yeah, spending what is it, like $13 on a bag of ground Dunkin' coffee at
really,
Albertsons or Kroger or whatever?
Tariffs cannot create inflation, but what they do is like any tax, they create distortions. And so what you have here is that and why did Trump lower the tariffs on certain things and not on others? Well, it's to attend to those distortions. So to be fair to Trump, he is doing the right thing there. But tariffs generally, as I say, the tariffs cannot raise prices overall. They can't do it, because you only can do that by increasing the money supply faster than the increase in goods and services. That's the only way, and only the government can do that through the Federal Reserve. So tariffs are not raising prices overall. They're not causing inflation, but they do create these distortions in the system. But the bigger distortions are our tax system and the overall continuous day-to-day inflation, monetary inflation that we have. Our regulatory system is way out of whack. Why don't we have coffee industry in the United States? I don't know. See, I
think we don't. I think they can't grow coffee here.
I don't know that.
Pretty sure.
Maybe you can. Maybe we have our lumber industry has put out much more product than it ever did before because of changes in how they grow trees and things like that. And so I don't know that we couldn't grow coffee here, but even if we couldn't, the way the system is built is a crony system. It's not a free market system. And so that's all these distortions. We have to get rid of the ones that we know about and that are obvious and that government is doing, and then see what the economy would look like. And then we could say, well, we need to have no tariffs on coffee or low tariffs on coffee. Fine, you can figure that stuff out. But until you fix the overall system, we're going to run into these problems every day. And the proof of it is we do, and we have been, especially since 1971. So until we get rid of these incredible distortions that government has put in the economy, we're going to be arguing about these sorts of things all the time.